Thank you for our men and women of the armed forces as they serve and protect our great nation, help our city, state, nation, and world leaders make good decisions during their times of control. We ask this in your name. Amen.
Be seated, please. Roll call. Jan?
Dr. Kincaid.
Here.
Mr. Newsom. Mr. Riley.
Here.
Mrs. Troop.
Present.
Mrs. Zimmershed. Here.
Okay, next item is public comments. We have nobody signed up, so in that case, we will move on to item number 3, the superintendent's report with potential board discussion.
Okay, so for the superintendent's report, and I'll just give it from back here, I'm going to do a wrap-up of the 57th legislature's Common Education legislative session, just on education laws. I'm not going to review every education law because there are multiples. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you just a little bit about some House bills. House Bill 1050 has to do with substitute teachers, and we talked about this once before, but it increases the days the number of days that a sub can sub in the classroom without a degree from 90 to 135 days, and if they have a degree, doesn't even have to be in education. If they have at least a bachelor's degree, it has increased from 100 to 145 days. We do have contract subs who have teaching certificate and they can sub as many days as needed. We do not have anyone that comes close to meeting these targets, even before the increased targets, the 90 or the 100 days. House Bill 1228 has to do with dyslexia PD training, and beginning with the year 2021, we're going to have to provide our teachers with professional development once a year on dyslexia. That's in identifying, training and meeting the needs of the students, and training on resources about dyslexia for teachers, students, and their parents. That goes into effect on November 1, but does not begin until the 2021 school year. We will lean on the guidance from the State Board of Education on what this professional development has to entail. This is a good one for public schools. House Bill 1395 is transparency and financial reporting, and this basically just tells us that our virtual charter schools are subject to the same reporting requirements and the same audit requirements as traditional public schools. They also have to use the OCAS accounting system now, which they did not have to before. Their board members are subject to the same conflict of interest requirements and must complete the same PD requirements as our community board members, as do the board members sitting here. But the biggest thing for us, I think, is that our current teachers cannot leave our district mid-contract to go to work at another virtual charter school, because they didn't have to follow the same accreditation guidelines, and we have to have that teacher's certificate on file. So our contract did no good. We could say we're not going to release and we're going to hold your certificate, but if they went to a virtual charter school, the virtual charter school didn't have to have their certificate. So now they can't just leave and go to a virtual charter. And just to remind you of that date, it's a revolving date. Teachers have to notify districts within 15 days of the first Monday in June. This month, it's June 18 by close of business. Teachers are on a continuing contract, so they have to let us know if they are returning by end of business on June 18th. Well, they don't have to let us know if they're returning. They have to let us know if they're resigning. So we will hold their certificate if they're going to another public school in Oklahoma until we find a suitable replacement. We've held certificates before, but we've always been able to find an employee. But I think we have 11 positions to fill at this point still. Tough week for us this last week. Did we have 5 resignations, Mr. Layton, this last week? So we have the rest of this week and through next Tuesday at 4 o'clock for resignations. So tough week for us this week, but that bill will help us. House Bill 2520 has to do with the medical exemption for chronic absenteeism. And if you'll remember during committee meetings this last week, we talked about the state's definition for chronic absenteeism. If a child has been in an accident or has a chronic illness, the parent can apply to the state for a waiver. That middleman has been taken out. Now schools can determine. We will have to follow the guidelines of the state, though, is what counts for a chronic absence, chronic absenteeism. House Bill 1781 has to do with teacher interns. This removes the requirement that a student teacher's internship be non-salaried. So let's say we had a student teacher who was student teaching within the district and we had a classroom that wasn't covered by a sub. Sometimes we'll send the student teacher over there to cover the classroom. Prior to this change, it was illegal for us to compensate the student teacher while they were practicing. And we have to decide what we're going to do. We've talked about different things. Maybe if they sub and then if they sign for us. Universities are kind of iffy on this. I'm not sure they really want their student teachers to be salaried, so the superintendent discussion is we all need to do the same thing, because if one district is paying, they might send their student teachers to that district versus another one. So we really want to do whatever Stillwater and Northwestern in Alva happens to do, because that's where we get most of our teacher interns. That goes into effect right before school starts. There has been a House Bill 2641, which changes the state testing date, and it changes the window for the Oklahoma State testing program for 1920. We begin April 20th, we end May 15th. That gives us 20 business days. This year, the window was from April 1 to May 3rd, which gave us 25 business days. We have fewer business days to test our kids. However, this bill was proposed and signed by the governor, passed both houses of the legislature to give our teachers more instructional time in the classroom.
Will that affect our athletic schedule?
Good.
I assume Jason's aware of this.
Well-
Because that May 15th date, we could still be doing testing.
Yes.
Right in the middle
We
of
will
playoffs.
be. It's going to affect a lot of schedules. It'll affect our athletic schedules. Our principals know of this. They knew of this before they went off contract. We just found out about it on May 28th, 2019, as a matter of fact. It's going to change field trips, class trips, sporting events, all kinds of activities. So, yes, we'll really have to take a look at that.
So I assume OSSAA may have to
They may.
make some rearrangements on theirs, because we really don't want to have to be at regionals or district.
Correct, and be testing,
During
which we
testing.
could be. The end of the window is mostly makeups, but with it starting on April 20th, we really don't like to test on Mondays. I don't know what day of the week that is. We don't like to test on Fridays either, so, and we have fewer business days to do our testing in. We have received our preliminary results already, and prior to this change, we had to receive the preliminaries no later than June 1. By pushing the dates back, we have to receive the preliminaries no later than June 20th. This has to do with general state appropriations. Brenda talked to you about the new dollars that House Bill 2765 allocates. We have $133.6 million for the weighted ADM increase. We have $15.3 million for education staff health benefits, which are our flexible benefit allowance. Those go up every single year, and districts have never been compensated for that. So we will be compensated for the increase in our FBA this next year. And it designates $58.9 million for increased compensation of certified personnel, and this is effective July 1, 2019. And here are some of the requirements for the teacher pay raise. We do have to prepare a new salary schedule to reflect the amount of raises enacted in the district, and this is for all levels, for bachelor's, master's, doctorate, and for our principals as well. So this raise goes to every certified employee with the exception of the superintendent, so we'll have to change all of our schedules. The law mandates a raise, meaning a permanent increase in the base salary the employee receives. So it goes into the base, not the total comp. It cannot be given as a stipend or bonus, and the raise is permanent and reoccurring. The raise must be in addition to the step increase on the salary schedule. Salary increases are not a replacement for step increases. So that's outlined in the law. Schools have two options for their certified. Award each teacher a minimum of $1,220 raise, adjusting each step on the local salary schedule, or we can differentiate the raise and award small amounts to some and larger amounts to others, as long as we are meeting an average of $1,220 per certified employee. So, as Brenda said, we'll know more June 30th of our standings and where we are, and we'll really have a discussion about what the board intends to go with the raise and the options. We'll have more solid and accurate numbers for you after June 30th. Some of the Senate bills. Senate Bill 193 had to do with the moratorium, and this bill actually gives us hope in education because if you remember, this bill reinstates certain requirements that had been waived for the last 10 years, 10 or more years actually, due to insufficient funding. And these guidelines will be phased in. This bill will restore the media standards and other advisory committee requirements this next school year, 2019-2020, because the state aid increased by at least $50 million from this last year with all the new dollars that are allocated into state aid. Now, that's not going to affect us. We continue to meet our media standards as far as how much we spent on library media per student at each site. So this is not going to be an issue for us. Some of the advisory committee meeting requirements we'll have to meet. We'll have to phase back in the textbook committee and that kind of thing that this moratorium put on that. Also, when this moratorium was first put into effect, it took the cap off how much we paid or how many students we had in a classroom. So beginning in July 1 of 2021, this bill will require districts to meet class size mandates for kindergarten and first grade. And those class size mandates are no more than 20 in a class without an assistant. So we could go over 20, but we're going to have to put a full-time assistant in the classroom. Can't be split between two. Now we split an assistant between two sections if they have 27 and 28, 55 in two sections. So now this is only going to happen if the fiscal year 21 exceeds the fiscal year 19 budget by $100 million. So we'll wait and see what we have to do there. If we don't do that, there will be a financial penalty assessed against any school district that does not meet those class size limitations for kindergarten and for first grade, according to state statute. The $50 million and $100 million amount shall not include appropriations dedicated for support of certified employee salary increases. So the $50 million is already there. We've already increased the $50 million. But if we have additional dollars that go into the budget, they cannot include the money for raises for certified people. So really, the only thing that's going to affect us with the Senate Bill 193 on the moratorium, it could affect us in July of 2021. If you'll remember, we have the 5-year plan to reduce our class size, but it did not get us to 20 in a classroom in K through first by fiscal year 21. So we may have to do some adjusting at that time. Hopefully we'll have more teachers at that point. So that's a big bill that could affect a lot of schools. Senate bills, another one is a big one, and we've had this discussion here recently, is Senate Bill 33, and it has to do with vaping. It was in our policy that vaping was included in our tobacco-free schools, but now it prohibits, there's law, prohibits the use of a vapor product in or on an educational facility in which K through 12 students are educated. Can't have them in school vehicles, at any school-sponsored or school-sanctioned event or activity. And this includes definitions of the terms vapor product or products, whether it has nicotine in the products or not. So that was a big one. And that's effective July 1, so it's not quite effective. Senate Bill 198 has to do with social networking and social media policy. We do have a social media policy for our employees, but if you are a state employee and you are sharing content or comment containing the following when directed at an Oklahoma citizen, and you can read all those things, it can include obscene sexual content or links to obscene sexual content, abusive behavior and bullying language or tone, illegal activity, and disclosure of information that policy regulates confidentiality. And we do have a social media policy, but now it's statute.
So does that policy now include teachers as, consider them as state employees?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Teachers are state employees, yes. And we had our own board policy for our employees, but now it's statute. So when our policy writers come out with the policy changes, probably we're not going to have to adapt ours a lot. I'm sure it will include that exact language. I think our policy has to do with pictures or content unbecoming of a school policy, and it states that you're a role model for the students and your social media posts should reflect that. We also have a new Senate Bill 382, Human Trafficking PD. This adds a responsibility to our Safe School Committee to identify PD needs of staff to recognize and report suspected human trafficking. And if you'll remember, last year we had to add a policy, it was statute, that we have to report immediately if we even suspect human trafficking. You know, we've always had the neglect and abuse, and then we had to add the human trafficking reporting last year, and now we have to add PD to the Safe School Committee, which is sad to me for where we're going with our state, that we have to include that. So you can tell there's lots of changes that have come along throughout the years. Senate Bill 441 has to do with the school calendar, and you know, we've talked about that in board meetings before and at committee meetings. This law does not go into effect until the 21-22 school year, so it still has time to change. But schools have to be in session 180 days if you have not been approved by the State Board of Education for a school hour policy, or you go 1,080 hours with a minimum of 160 days of instruction each school year if a district board adopts a school hour policy. So, in other words, the 4-day-a-week schools that have adopted the 1080 policy have to go 165 days now, minimum. There's one more little caveat. 1,080 hours each school year if a district board adopts the school hours policy and meets certain minimum guidelines for student performance and district cost savings, and this will be established by the State Board of Education and must be approved by the state legislature. So if schools are proving that they are still performing up to a certain level, they can still go the 1080 hours. And I have looked at all the school report cards on the 4-day-a-week schools, and there's just not many that are meeting high targets. So there are a few out there, though, that could be approved. But this does not go into effect until the 21-22 school year. Any questions on that? Okay, this is effective September 1 of 2019. There are some other new laws and mandates that will require change to Board of Education policies. Our policy writers will send us legal changes with the policy advisory update in August. And typically what we do is we present those to you in the September board meeting, and then we make changes, get approvals, and then you adopt those policies or not in the October board meeting. I didn't list every new school law, so there will be a lot of information that we'll talk to you about in the September board meeting. And then our teacher administration negotiations are slated for Tuesday, July 30th, 2019. We're falling apart up here.
Yeah.
So, any questions on the legislative laws that I talked to you about tonight? There are several more, and I won't say they're inconsequential, but these were probably the most impactful.
Good job. Okay, thanks, Shelley. Next is the annual development educational rates for 2017 and 18, and Mr. Thad Dilbeck, Ponca City High School principal, will present that one.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Mr. Riley said, here to give a report on the college remediation data. You can see that this report comes from the State Board of Regents, and it's about a 2-year lag. This is for our 2017 POHI graduates. Remediation percentages for our graduates or our students who are attending college, and what percentage in that have to receive remediation in 4 specified areas. You can see our percentage requiring remediation compared to the state percentage on this slide. Science, not a lot going on in science. English, if you compare our percentage to last year, there's a slight uptick for us. We're still right in the same ballpark with the state. You can see the math remediation numbers. There's a great difference between ours and the state, which makes us look good, but likewise, the same for the reading area, working the other way. Now, if you'll recall, last year during this report, we discussed briefly what this data is really telling us, and I learned last year, upon having to give this report, that a lot of this is determined by how the university or the college or the community college, wherever students may be taking these classes, how they code classes and whether it's coded as remediation or not. Just looking at this slide, reading, again, when a student goes to university or college, if they're having to take a reading test when they get there so that the college knows where to place them, then we have a significant number from this slide who's having to take that remediation course. Flip side of that is we have very few in math. Now, what I will tell you, by looking at the next slide, these are the comparables that I like to do. Schools our size, schools in our area. Again, you can see science. Not a lot of remediation going on in the sciences. With the English remediation for POHI at 18.5%, that's not quite as good as what Enid's doing, not nearly as good as Stillwater, but ahead of Choctaw. But again, when you look at the math percentages, ours is very, very, very good. Much better than Enid's, better than Stillwater's, and that number from Choctaw makes you question, what is this data telling us? And likewise with the reading. I mean, look at the difference between the math and the reading when you talk about Ponca City and Choctaw. So when I talk to personnel at NOC, where a lot of our students start as freshmen, that's when I get the explanation of, well, it's kind of a program we have here and how we like to start students. And I did last year call Choctaw's principal and asked him about their numbers last year, and he had received the same information from a community college where a lot of their students start concurrently. in what they do in math in Choctaw. So, you know, just I think we all in this room understand that you have to understand what the data is where the data is coming from. I will say that, you know, just to an outsider looking in, they would say, wow, Pohi's doing a great job in math. But I think a lot of that has to do with, yes, we are doing a good job in math. We're gonna take that when we can get it. But it also has to do with what our students are taking concurrently at NOC, and then also what courses, where the majority of our students go when they start taking their first college math classes, and what that university requires of them. And again, I'll show you, when you look at these numbers and see that our reading percentage is so high, but I'll show you with the next slide, the K County percentages compared to the state percentages, because of a lot of our students are taking their first reading courses or courses where reading is measured at NOC. And I think that you can see by those percentages that K County is significantly higher than the state, because a lot of our students are starting and getting that test at NOC, and that's a requirement that NOC has of them in a course that they're being placed into. And there's a bit more information in there. Anybody have any questions? Well, then, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Delbeck.
Thank you, Mr. Delbeck. Okay. Consent agenda. Consent agenda includes the minutes from the last meeting, contracts under $10,000. And by the way, there were 40 of them this time. I'm not going to read all 40, but I did summarize a little bit. We have OSSBA's membership and unemployment services. It's one of the larger ones. Loftus and Wetzel. We have to bond the clerks for the board, other activities. Pitney Bowes has lobby guard renewal and postage meter. Also, Brett tells me that lobby guard, we're buying a couple lobby guards. We're trying to get out of the contractual arrangement with Pitney Bowes when we can for lobby guards. There were about a dozen school-specific software programs requested by principals. Each school is paying for their own, and these pretty much cover Lincoln Union, the library managers at all sites, several other locations. Activity funds, we had about half a dozen fundraisers. Most of these were small amounts. Department of Transportation had a $4,500 expenditure we need to approve. It's for bus driver physicals and random drug testing. Several maintenance agreements for generators, fire alarms, asbestos testing. We also had pre-employment and student drug testing policies. Had some activities for the marching band. And PEG writing. Isn't that the one that you write an essay and we send it off and
Yes.
other locations compare it?
Yes.
Okay, that's something we've done previous also. We had 4 or 5 logo and licensing agreements for royalties. And then the only other one that kind of stood out a little bit, and it's no big deal, was Sean Anderson does the Coach's Corner and the monthly board wrap-up. This is the second or third year in a row for him at $2,500 apiece. We also talked a little bit about administrators that are designated for the federal programs, activity fund, custodians, and bonds. I think we have another agenda item for it on here that we'll have to approve, and open transfers. So with that being said and done, unless there's any questions, I'd ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda items 5.1 through 5.6.
I'll make a motion to approve.
We have the motion from Judy. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
A second from Nancy. Any comments or questions? If not, call for the vote.
Mr. Riley?
Aye.
Mrs. Troop?
Aye.
Mrs. Zimmershed? Aye. Dr. Kincaid?
Motion carries. Item 6.1 is discuss and take actions on the following district financial reports. We talked about all these in the Finance Committee. Unless someone has a question on them, It's basically just some general expenditures, some pretty large ones, but a lot of it has to do with the bond issues that we have going forward. Brenda will answer questions if anybody has any. If not, I'd call for a motion to approve 6.1 in its entirety, A through T. Do we have a motion?
Approve it, 6-1, A through T.
Have a motion from David. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second from Judy. Comments or questions? Call for the vote.
Mrs. Troop?
Aye.
Mr. Riley?
Aye.
Dr. Kincaid?
Aye.
Mrs. Zimmershed? Aye.
Okay, motion carries. 6.2, this is consider and take action on the budget that Brenda presented to us. She did an excellent job, as always, on it. So with that, I'd ask for a motion to approve the physical budget 2019-2020 school year.
I motion to approve.
I have a motion from Nancy, second from David. Comments or questions on it? Call for the vote.
Dr. Kincaid?
Aye.
Mrs. Zimmershed? Aye. Mrs. Troop?
Aye.
Mr. Riley?
Aye. Motion carries. 6.3, board to consider and take action on a motion approving the renewal of the sublease agreement. This is the one when we do a lease revenue bonds. We had to go through K County Public Building Authority to do that, and yearly we have to resubmit an approval for it. I will go ahead and go through all these, and then we'll ask for a motion to approve them all, if that's okay with you guys. 6.4, consider and take action, appointment on bond authorization for the following. This is for all the clerks, Brenda, Jan, Leanne, Betty, and Kathy, something that we also have to do and required by law. 6.5, consider and take action on the following proposed board policy changes. I could explain them, but Shelley can do a whole lot better job.
Okay, 4.3 has to do with our student promotion and retention and student pass-fail a course. There are actually, it has to do with Reading Sufficiency Act. Basically, we only changed one word. We took out some old dates, 2016 and 2017. And then on our student reading proficiency teams, we used to have a reading specialist certified sit in on those meetings. Now with the severe teacher shortage crises, we don't have very many certified reading specialists. In fact, the one we had just retired. So now the state allows us to say if available. So only 2 dates changed to moving forward, and then 2 words if available on 4.3. On 4.3-1.0, it's at the back of your agenda on 127. This changes the course requirements for the high school, with chronic absenteeism changing to students missing more than 10% of the school year. We had to change some verbiage that says to meet course requirement, students must be in attendance 90% of each semester to receive course credit. Now, for reasons limited exclusively to medical or extenuating circumstances, parents may appeal an attendance-based denial of course credit to a committee chaired by the appropriate principal or grade-level assistant principal. So now, if they're out for like a chronic absence, if they've been in an accident, or if they have a chronic illness, or if they had to leave the country for something, their parents may appeal to the site principal. Okay, 4.3-2.0 has to do with summer school requirements. And basically, this just needed to be cleaned up. When we were looking at our attendance policies and correlating those to chronic absenteeism, it used to say in grade 8, when a student fails to demonstrate proficiency in language arts, math, or science, proficiency can be achieved by earning a grade of C or better in the course, or if they obtain proficient or above on the OSTP, which is our state testing program, or obtaining proficient on the 8th grade proficiency test. We changed that to they can earn a D or better in a course, and actually, we've been practicing that for about 10 years, just didn't update the policy. Or we've changed the verbiage to from satisfactory to proficient on the state testing program. We did away with the verbiage on end-of-year instructions and end-of-year tests because we no longer have those. There is a waiver process where a parent can appeal to the building principal for summer school, but there are no changes to that part of the policy. So basically, just verbiage to update with our new testing program. School attendance policy. This was a big one that we talked about extensively in committee meetings. And we actually had some verbiage in there that our policy writer attorney suggested that we change. We talked about the steps for the attendance policy, and basically it's going to correlate with the new city ordinance. There are no consequences until you get down to about 17 absences. Now, the state recognizes absences, excused, unexcused, and suspensions. So when you get to 17 absences, that's more than 10% of the school year. We had 167 days, so anything over 16.7. Now, we had in there that we defined chronic absenteeism as excused and unexcused and included suspension. Our attorney, and she's exactly right, said we cannot punish a kid with a suspension and then apply the city ordinance punishment for the suspension. If we choose to suspend a student, it doesn't go against them on the city ordinance. The school will just have to take that chronic absenteeism hit. So we clarified that definition as all absences, excused or unexcused, count toward chronic absenteeism with the exception of approved school-related activities. So if they're on a band, OSSA band competition, or they're on a sporting event or an approved field trip, that does not count. Now, we talked about the steps, and the steps are on page 132, and we went through all of these steps. There is no consequence until you get down to step 17, and that's where we invoke the city ordinance and call the district attorney at that point. Now, on all of our other steps, those are listed out on page 132. It's basically just communication between the principal, the parent, and the student on where you are with your absences. We have contracts, we have different letters that we're going to give the students. We will do a press release on the definition of what chronic absenteeism is and the steps that we'll be taking for each absence. And I shared with you at committee meetings the number of absences we have just for students that have over 17 absences. I didn't even share the data for students that had less than 17 absences. And that number was ridiculously high. I mean, so we have to address attendance. This is going to be more work proactively on the principal and the counselor, but we have to do something to combat our chronic absenteeism. I mean, we focus on instruction all the time. We can't do a lot with instruction if our kids aren't here. So basically, it's just a communication tool. And this policy also says that a parent may appeal to a committee chaired by the principal or the grade level assistant principal on any chronic absenteeism issue or any other extenuating circumstance. So if they've been in a car accident and they're in the hospital, obviously we would want our principals to make the common sense decision, but it is in this policy that they can appeal if they don't feel like the correct decision was made. Okay, that was 7.4-1.0. And then 7.4-3.0 has to do with truancy. And truancy is just flat skipping school without an excuse. Truancy, as indicated here, includes any unexcused absence of one or more days or parts of the school day, and parents have failed to notify the school. So that's all the verbiage that we're adding, and parents have failed to notify the school. It is the school official's responsibility to determine how the absence will be coded. In our student information system, we have to code every single absence. So we will still follow our attendance policy with truancy issues as well. 7.5 to 4.1 has to do with in-district elementary transfers. And if you will remember, a few years ago, we added the percentage for each grade level in which they could no longer accept transfers at the fall transfer meeting, and that percentage was 93%. It helped quite a bit with our transfers, but we added another section, and this is how it reads. The maximum number of transfers allowable per grade level at any elementary site may not exceed 15% in kindergarten through third grade, or 18% in fourth and fifth grade. So basically, if there are two sections of second grade, the principal can only accept 10 transfers, basically 5 per class in K through 3. And I'll give you the reason for this. At one of our sites, we have like 58 in a class, and 22 of those students in the two sections of 58 are transfers. And that's just not right to do that to the teachers. So it's almost a class full of students. So we're limiting the number of transfers. In grades 4th and 5th, it basically works out they can accept 6 transfers per class. So if they have 2 sections, they can accept 12, 3 sections, they can accept 18. I did a board report a few months back about our plan for balancing our class size across the district, and this will help us do so in reaching that plan. We also added that exceptions may only be considered or granted at the superintendent's discretion, and we wanted to allow that in. There could be a brother or sister, and we may need to allow one more student to meet the guidelines. We do not want to split up families. And I believe that's it on all the board policies.
See why I said she could do it better. For those that may not know, we spent a lot of time talking about these. We had follow-up discussions.
We met after our attorney.
We met with the attorneys again, so I feel very good about these policy changes that we're making. Well, Jan wants to get home early to watch the Warriors, so here we go. I'm going to try to get through a whole bunch of these contracts.
We need to
vote on those
vote on
policies.
it.
Well, we can keep going. I'm going to do all 6. I'm going to go through all the 6s, and then we'll have one motion for all of them. 6.6 is consider and take action to accept bids for Ross Transportation for an alternative fuel school bus. This is the one that we've got a grant for half the money. We're paying half the money for a 77-passenger bus. Is this propane or natural gas, Brett?
Propane.
This is for propane. 6.7, consider and take action for participation in the 2019 Summer Food Service Program. We have applied. We've been approved. It's going to be at West, Union, and University Center this summer. 6.8, consider and take action on a GMP, that being a guaranteed maximum price, for the Howell Elevator Secure Entry and Seating Projects in the amount of $575,609.16. Does that include West seats also, doesn't it? Correct. Okay.
And does not include the elevator.
Right, the elevators are not in there, but seats for both Howell and West Secure Entry are on there. 6.9, agreement with PageMaster's website and design. This is the same as last year, the same lady that did us a good job last year, and I believe it's the same price.
Yes, Barbara Allen.
6.9B, agreement with Loftus and Wetzel. Initially, it looks like we've got an $83,000 increase, and we do, but we have a full year effect for concert hall, Robinson activities, football dressing room, press box, and weight room. So we're having to pay full year effect insurance, and that's why the bill has gone up with them. It's actually through OSIG, but they're the carrier that picks them. C, agreement with Linda B. Johnson. That's almost like Lyndon B. Johnson for psychoeducational services. This is a mandate we must fulfill, and we don't have anyone in the system that can provide this. D, agreement with Edmonton for Study Island, which assists the students in their learning and processing for some software. This goes to elementary and west. Each site will pay their own fair share. E, ratification of a contract with CenterPoint Energy and third party. This $68,000 is Brett's best estimate on what our natural gas bill will be for the upcoming year. F, agreement with Wilson Dotson Associates. This is the company that does our auditors. It's a 5 or 6, 7%, a fairly small increase in the auditing service that we're required. G, renewal with Oklahoma School Assurance Groups for workers' comp insurance. This is about $75,000 less than last year, and I think that's probably fewer employees is the reason for that, a little bit less.
Plus, they're being more competitive because other groups are trying
They're
to.
doing us a good job, so that's $75,000 savings. H, agreement with Nextiva to provide, this is our IP service provider, and this has allowed us to really reduce significantly the AT&T bill. I, agreement with Galaxy Business Equipment for comprehensive copier maintenance. This is for the districts. Copiers, I want to encourage everybody to use their district service when we can. We save money when we use them. J is the agreement with Winter Road Tally Architects. This is the old Lewis architectural firm, the new company. Now, Winter Road Tally Architects is a generic contract for their services for next year. Services will be between 6 and 8% based on the type work, whether it's new building, remodel, refurbish, et cetera. K, I'm working my way, Jan. Agreement with EduSkills for English language learners. This is agreement for the services for the bilingual students. L, agreement with Cynthia Lumpkin to provide Braille and certified visual impairment. Again, I don't think we have anyone on staff to do this, so we're having to outsource this service. M is a maintenance agreement with Stanley Systems for the district copiers. And it gives a price per page, which is 6 to 10% increase. N, agreement with Level Data for zone integration services, and we're adding child nutrition to this and guaranteeing a no price increase for 3 years, is my understanding.
That's correct.
Agreement with CDWG for Mimecast email protection service. This is one I question pretty strongly. But if you remember, our email system got hacked last year. This is $21,000 we're going to spend to hopefully not have it happen again. If it we don't know whether it's going to be a good investment or not. If we get hacked, it may not be. If we don't get hacked, it may be a great investment. We just don't really know. But it's
Payroll that got hacked.
I'm
through
sorry,
email.
through the email, payroll got hacked. So it's definitely would be worth $21,000 if it'll keep us from getting hacked again. License agreement with Renaissance Learning. All we're doing is putting the contract on a full school year basis versus a partial year. Q, agreement with IXL Learning for site licenses. Annuals agreement that added the ACT prep for all juniors to our regular site licensing. R, agreement with Evans and Associates to resurface and repair the walking track at Trout School. It's my understanding the PTA is paying about 3/4 of this, Brett, and we're paying about 1/4 of it, and it will be done this summer. Elevator maintenance is S. And with that, Ms. Miller, we're getting close to the end, so I would ask for a motion, unless there's questions, for item 6.1 through
.3.
all of them. 6.10, I think is the last one, wasn't it? 6.9?
6.3 to 6.9.
6.9. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion from Nancy. Do I have a second?
A second.
Second from Judy. Comments or questions? Call for the vote.
Mrs. Zimmershed.
Aye.
Dr. Kincaid. Aye. Mr. Riley.
Aye.
Mrs. Troop.
Aye.
Motion carried. 6.10, do we need an executive session?
Not necessarily.
Anybody need one? Judy?
I don't need one.
David? Nancy?
Mr. Layton, do you have
Curtis?
any updates?
Let's have a real quick one.
Okay.
We can talk about things that are on the list here that I'm supposed to read, but we're going to get out of here in time for Jan.
Okay.
So what's the Warriors? So with that, we're adjourned to executive session for a short acknowledgement. We're back. Executive session minutes were completed by Jan and will be held in confidence. Consider and take action on recommendation for termination of assignments, resignations, employment of personnel. Do I have a motion for 6.13?
I move
I have a
6.13.
motion from David and a second from Nancy.
Yes.
Roll call.
Mr. Riley.
Aye.
Mrs. Troop.
Aye.
Mrs. Zimmershed.
Aye.
Dr. Kincaid.
Aye.
Any new business, Shelley?
No new business.
No new business? Judy, any no new business?
Nope.
Motion to adjourn.
I move.
And a second. David, Nancy, all in favor say aye. Aye. We're adjourned.
Thank you.